Darin, thanks for coming over and being on the show again.
Oh man, it's this studio is just sets the tone.
It does set the tone. And we're it's now being adorned by your beautiful your Baruka nut over here, which regular listeners of my show will be familiar with because we did a whole episode talking about it. What's going on, man? You've had a busy past couple of months.
Jesus. Yeah. With this whole pandemic, it was just like, I mean, obviously these things are in motion, right? So there's a lot of, I mean, the show itself has been in motion since, we started tinkering around with that idea and
so cool.
Early to mid 2018. And then, the fire happened and all of my stuff. I'm like, I gotta get my own voice out there because it's at a certain point I love being on podcasts, but then you also miss out on certain things that you want to talk about, and so you get to just exercise that. So then I was like, I want to do it, and of course all the the mind goes, everyone's doing it. I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. I know some really cool people that no one knows about. So if I just did it on that, so
you mean your new podcast, right?
Yeah.
It's so cool. I mean, it's such an amazing it's an excuse more than anything to be able to reach out to people who you admire, who you want to learn from. I've really enjoyed having it, so congrats.
Yeah, thanks. It's super fun. I really enjoy it.
And so I mean, on top of that, you've got this Netflix show, Down to Earth, which is amazing. It's really, really well done. When did you film that? What's the backstory there?
Yeah, the backstory is it's so funny. It started with a podcast. So on Rich Roll's podcast, Zac reached out to Connor Dwyer, who was an Olympian swimmer, who knew Rich. And he said, I really like whatever I said, whatever I was getting into. He was just he was touched by something. And so he reached out to Connor. Connor reached out to Rich. Rich reached out to me and said, hey, can I give Zac Efron your number? He wants to reach out to you. And, people reach out all the time of all sorts. And so I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. And then I just forgot about it. So then months later, I just sitting on the couch one day and I get this text, hey, it's Zac Efron, and hey, I really loved what you said. He was just very sweet, just kind of poured his heart out on a text, and I was like, wow, I can definitely go out to lunch with this kid. He seems very cool. And so we went out to eat the Golden Mean Cafe, a nice little vegan joint.
Nice. And
we just sat for hours, and he just really ended up talking about, asking me questions about what I do and all of those things. And so it was really at the very end that he goes, so what else are you doing? And I said, well, I have this idea for a show, because for a decade people have been, you should do a superfood hunting show. And in theory it sounds really great, but in and out of production, what it's like. And it's like, for those things to line up to really, it really has to feel right to do it, because it takes a lot to do it, and you're not making money on that thing. And so I just kind of walked away from numerous meetings, it's just not. And so I had this idea I said, yeah, Zac, I have this idea of a little medicinal side of the adventure with the environmental side of things, with highlighting maybe some longevity stuff and getting into water a little. I mean, there's so much you can explore. I just had this current interest list that I wanted to go with experts, like buddies and colleagues that was lined up on the show. And he was like, so this is like, we're about getting in our car from the dinner or from the lunch, and he goes, that sounds amazing. Like, we would travel to those areas. You're traveling to those, you're meeting those. I'm like, yeah, of course. And so 2 hours later, he calls me and he said, I have a deal with Netflix, but it's a show that I'm not really into. It has certain aspects of what you even saw on this show. It had travel. It had eating cuisine from amazing places and small business and all of that stuff. And then I had this element of environmental, fitness, broader expansion of what life's about and all of this stuff. And so he wrestled with his team. I mean, obviously he's the commander of his own team, but they didn't know me from a hole in the wall, right? So he said, we're going to do this. I really want to do this. So I met with all the producers, I met with his whole team, and it was that whole thing, and he made it happen and walked in, and we changed the whole, essentially brought those two concepts together. That deal was done. So it was already going to happen, but it wasn't happening because he didn't want to do that one. So then he agreed to just travel along the whole time. And we put the show together, and the production team was unbelievable. And it turns out that, I was super nervous because I didn't want to do something so that I lived and breathed. I didn't want to do a Hollywood thing. I had no interest. People pitching that stuff. Well, okay, cool, but let's have this person or that. I'm like, no. So the way it happened, and him reaching out to me and him admiring something that I was about, set this different tone, because it wasn't me going to him saying, let's do this show, and him going through his managers and all this shit. And so, yeah, we just went into development of that thing. And sure enough, we started traveling for 3.5 months, and it was incredible. So, I mean, and this is something important, because when Zac, he said these things to me that sealed the deal, because I wasn't swooned by Hollywood or needing to do that, because I wanted to do something from my heart and do it right. And he said, I have all these followers, but I want to use them for good. I want to do something for good. There's reasons why I'm not advertising and pushing products and all of this stuff, because I want to do something and better the planet and all of that. And I believed him. And ultimately, Zac is a very empathic, kind, caring. I mean, I call him kid because he's like my little brother. But so yeah, it took off from there, and it was scary, because it was like, I'm usually superfood hunting or driving or being out in the bush or just going somewhere and leading a certain march. And it was a little intimidating when I didn't have any of my support in a certain sense, but I was surrounded by his team, his production, all of that stuff. And I was like, oh my God, what have I done? Like, I hope this turns out like, and so I had to also let the production inform me what was a good show. Right. So, and if it was up to me, it would probably been way too intense. Well, I know it would have been. It would have been too intense, too informative, too much. And the beautiful thing about this convergence of production and him and my ideas and their ideas was it balanced this whole thing out in a way that kind of reached to those people that aren't in this space, like you and I, or even someone else. It reached across to that aisle to a massive amount of people that, I mean, thousands of messages a day.
Wow.
Like, that show changed my life.
Wow.
Like, show changed my life. And then you're like, and my 9-year-old, my 11-year-old, my 13-year-old, my 70-year-old, you're like, it's just like, wow. And so, yeah, that's, I mean, the long version of that kind of front story of how it all kind of came together in a beautiful way. It's actually kind of a miracle that, Zac's super busy, and he's definitely got his own attention challenges, like, because he gets pulled everywhere,
I'm sure.
And the fact that we were absolutely able to get that done and travel and accomplish this show was amazing. And again, it was challenging, because there was a couple of times I didn't think it was going to happen, and it got delayed, and And then it came out at what seems to be kind of a perfect time.
I don't think like average people or civilians, like people who are not in the industry, who are not in Hollywood, realize how difficult it is to get a show greenlit.
Yeah.
It's one, it's one of the hardest things to do. I mean, I've been working, in air quotes, like in Hollywood, in media for more than a decade. And the fact that you guys were able to get a show that is simultaneously both smart but fun and adventurous, it's really commendable. It's awesome.
Thank you. And humbly, just again, thank God there was a team, you know. And listen, you can always go, we could have done that, we could have done this, but they kept saying to me, because I had my list of colleagues and researchers and doctors and all of that stuff, and we're going to get into it, and I had them all lined up, and I talked to them. I've been preparing, and obviously we still had Dr. Longo and Dr. Pez, and we had a lot of great people on the show, and there's so much to explore, but the surrender was vital for me, so that I wouldn't just sit there and struggle inside myself. And then the trust developed clearly on the road of everybody. Like, listen, it became their mission too, and they felt it, and it kind of infused into everyone. Like, this is not a show. It's never been a show for me. It's never been a Netflix and a thing and then a thing and I got a TV show. It's never been that, and it still isn't. It's a mission. And we can't just, you and I just can't talk to our same people. We do have to reach and be open. And so that was humbling and great that I certainly didn't know how to do that. But having a team that cared all the way up from the top, and everyone on the ground, from the camera guys, everyone was altered from the show, because you're looking through this camera, you're learning, and we had so much footage. I mean, there was so much we had, and there's so many experiences that I don't even know how they even try to edit something like that, but they did it. We had stellar and Emmy award winning people.
It looked great. There was a lot of, as they say, there was a lot of money on the screen. It looked like the production value was amazing. What was it like for you experiencing? Because obviously Zac is going to be very used to the rigors of production, and the ups and downs that go along with that. But what was that like for you?
Well, funny enough, it's like, from being on the road and I've had crews with me before and articles written. So like superfood hunting or something like that, it's just being me. Like, so that's not hard. I mean, it was a little more intense because you have 13 people and you have, but there's certain things that I never wanted to, if I didn't have already met those people, I didn't want to meet them until the cameras were on. I just want everything to be, I don't want to set this up. I don't want to, and so from that perspective, like, I'm cool just being me and letting it rip. And yeah, of course it's weird because you have cameras all over, but it became so fun. And again, it's just mission based. So for me, I just kept going back to, if I get into my head or I got uncomfortable, I just go back to that space in me. I'm like, well, what am I here for? What is this all about? And then Zac and I, there's several beautiful conversations that were just too vulnerable and too, but we just would forget the cameras were on several times, and I think how they ended up editing it, that was just really us. And I think that's reached a lot of people, because obviously that if anyone hasn't seen the ending, there's an intense part of that happened to me during the filming, and so I'll just leave. I mean, most people probably will watch it by now, but that it's just very real. It just losing my house and everything else, but and listen, Zac and I, like, he's always been a character too, so he's always prepared and acted and all of that stuff, and for him to be him, this is the first time he's really ever been doing that. So for him, it was like just opening up to letting people see him. So that was a different muscle for him. And yeah, he was uncomfortable and nervous at first, and we talk about it, but at the end of the day, we just had a good time, and just every opportunity, every meeting, every kind of sitting there learning along the way, we come away with just like real movement inside of ourselves. Like there's nothing like there's that part where we're picking up trash, and we've picked up trash. You picked up trash on the beach or some cleanup, but just something, just when you really let yourself feel what it is that you're doing and feel the magnitude of microplastic in our environment, and it becomes so intense, because it's just like, my God, like 9.2 billion metric tons of this plastic on this planet is just breaking down, and then further just annihilating ecosystems after ecosystems and micro ecosystems. And it was just that was intense, just sitting there all afternoon picking up plastic, and you just sit there in a meditative state, kind of emotional, because it just feels. And even Zac said in that one of those clips, he was like, I feel like I don't even have to move in this one space. I don't even have to take a step, and I can just sit here all day picking up plastic.
Wow.
Yeah. So it infused all of us on the crew, and him, and listen, you never know how things are going to be received, and you never know. There's so many variables to everything, and just to see regular people being so impacted it's one of the greatest kind of feelings, to know that you've made another impact that reached over and touched somebody. So it's been pretty amazing.
It's so cool. I feel like many of your newer fans, because I mean the show has blown up, certainly might not be all that familiar with the fact that this is something that like you've embodied for a very long time. I mean, you're a superfood hunter.
Yeah.
You're like the Indiana Jones of like the superfood world. So I'm just curious, like over the course of the production process of this show, you've been so steeped in this topic, in these topics for such a long time. Like, are there any moments, like standout moments over the course of producing the show that even your mind was blown, and that you felt like you were experiencing for the first time?
Yeah, several. I mean, the doctor at Lourdes, the miracles, like them going through quantifiable miracles of bathing in the Lourdes water that came from Saint Bernadette, digging in the sand from an apparition of Mother Mary, and now millions of people converge on this spring that keeps flowing at Lourdes. And so the doctor in the episode, his job is to be a doctor. So he receives these claimed miracles, and he probably sits down and hears about 100 plus a year. And so his job is to wean out an explanation. He's trying to find an explanation. Okay, well, this happened and you're healing. Well, it wasn't really spontaneous. You were taking this medication, and then they're like, okay, well but there's certain protocols and years and decades. No miracle is less than 10 years of research. So there was one part in that episode, and you'll see that they revealed it the first time. Again, I always loved just not meeting the people and let it all. And he showed us this miracle that this guy had cancer all over the place, and you see it on the show, and we put up the x-ray, and it had eaten his pelvis. There was nothing, there was really no bone left, and you could see this huge mass. And they had gone through all of the research over a decade, and they couldn't figure out how a decade later, well, it was a matter of, I don't know how long it was before they did their second x-ray, and the whole pelvis was intact and
What?
gone. So this guy didn't believe in this. He was dying, and his family said, let's just try this. And he went bathing. He felt tingly right away, and he had a remission of cancer immediately.
That's insane. So wait, where is Lourdes?
Lourdes,
Lourdes.
yeah, in
Where
France.
is that? In France.
Yeah.
So it's like a hot spring?
It's not a hot spring. It's just a spring that in the, I don't know how long ago, 1800s, Saint Bernadette saw this apparition. And that apparition, Mother Mary told her to dig. And the spring would be a healing spring.
Wow.
And so now, I mean, there's a beautiful light ceremony with candles and stuff with thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So you see everyone from wheelchairs to cancer to everyone converges on this just amazing place. And the doctor is there to wean out if, in fact, the spontaneous healing is well, he's not determining if there's a miracle. He's just trying to determine through science if there's an explanation. And if he can't figure out anything from well over a decade, because they don't give a miracle away without, and so there's I think 70 claimed miracles. So if they can't explain it, and their whole research team and their doctors, they pass it off and go, there's no explanation, and this hit all the criteria of spontaneous remission and healing, and so then they deem this the miracle. And so when we saw the x-rays before and after of one of the latest miracles, it was like you're staring at this x-ray and you're like, what? Like, it's unbelievable.
Wow.
So, so things like that. And then, I think Iceland was great because we were underground in a cave, and then them, they're these bore holes of Mother Earth just exploding, not volcanic, but just this energy. And then they cap them, and then they use that for just huge geothermal capture. And, there is some off-gassing of CO2. And so they take that CO2 and inject it back in the earth, and it basically becomes rock again. So that was like, we could do that all over the planet.
For energy, for clean energy.
For sequestering the CO2. Not for sure for geothermal. Not as easily as Iceland, because it's just there's so much geothermal activity. But for sequestering CO2, of just like injecting that CO2 back into the earth, and it becomes rock again.
Wow.
And crystals that you could then actually use and create jewelry from, or whatever. Like
diamonds, right? Aren't diamonds like
they're a little
pure carbon?
Yeah, it's just a little more, I think, pressure and time than they actually become a diamond. But these are like fake diamonds.
Wow.
Like they can do it and receive that output and actually get rid of that CO2. So things like that, listen, I mean, I did off camera, I did some Icelandic foraging with this herb company, and like that's an incredible area. But just the feeling from this borehole, the nature's just power is just so humbling and intense. But yeah, I mean, the several, and obviously just, running around and in the Costa Rica episode, and we kind of jumped into Putamona, which you had to get there by boat. And it was like this, I mean, it came off as a bit of a hippie commune, but it was very much steeped in learning about reforestation and regeneration and plant education and herb education and medicinal plant usage and stuff like that. So we just barely touched on those surface. I ran Zac around in the Amazon on the last episode, and scraping off chuchuasi as a immune stimulant, and dragon's blood, and it's the healing properties of dragon's blood.
What's that? What's dragon's blood?
So dragon's blood is this incredible, it's this tree, and you can hit it with a machete, and it's literally dripping blood. It's
It's
almost
red?
Yeah, it's almost the same composition, and it's incredible for scrapes and burns and scars, and incredible collagen acting properties on topically, but you can also take it internally. An incredible plant that, they've been studying it for a long time, but hard to kind of harvest and keep in its raw state. And then we were drinking this amazing plant-based milk called Batawa, and no one knows about this stuff. Well, they do now, but it was a very good friend of mine, and we're still looking to get it into the market.
Wow.
And he is single-handedly created climbing apparatuses for this, because it's different than like acai, right? So acai, a lot of people know. So they're smaller. You can put a connected rope around your feet and then shimmy up pretty easily. This is a lot bigger, so you can't really bear hug this thing and climb it. So you need climbing apparatuses. So my friend Tarek, which is a PhD ecologist, but he's worked in and out of the Amazon for 35 years. He created climbing apparatuses to give away. So now we can access Batawa. We can climb up the tree and get the fruit. Creates an economy, creates value back in the Amazon, so they don't have to, cut. A lot of deforestation happens family to family because they're, it's $5 for that tree, it's 10 for that, so they just kind of cut them down here and there. But if you create value of those trees and other plants, then that's that income that's sustainable for them. So that's why I wanted to tell people about that. We didn't quite get into all of that reason, but Batawa is like one of the most delicious. Like, it's kind of got a very similar quality, fatty acid, fat quality, like as olive oil.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and it's got this antioxidant in it, and this purple, and we drank it there. We made some and drank it. It's just one of the most delicious milks ever. So I mean, that in the jungle doing that thing, that's the fun for me. But the one wild thing is when we're at the Ayahuasca Foundation.
Oh man.
Yeah, we didn't do ayahuasca, but
it wasn't in that episode.
Yeah, we didn't do. I mean, I've done ayahuasca.
It was off camera.
Yeah, off camera. The camera guys were still on it while they're. Yeah. So I mean, anniversary for me was 22 years ago when I first did ayahuasca. But so we ended up just talking about plants and cleansing plants, and then we actually went through some of the cleansing ceremonies. And I was being smoked out at about, which we looked at the timeline. I didn't know yet that my house had burned, but I was literally being smoked out at about the exact same time my actual house was being burned.
Oh my God, wow.
And that was just such a weird thing. So on some level, it was probably preparing me for that news or that situation, because that was a really powerful thing. So yeah. So anyway, but that was its own intensity after that. But yeah, we just, the biggest challenge with all of that stuff, I could be in any one of those situations for a very long time, because, in and out and just do the filming and just come like, I want to get to it. I want to get working on something. But yeah, I feel
like Zac is probably not the first person to meet you and then think to themselves, man, this guy needs to have his own show,
Yeah.
A lot of people have asked me, actually, there's an episode about water, which I haven't seen. Mm-hmm. What is that about? Because I haven't yet seen it, but a lot of people, it's like resonated with a lot of people.
Yeah, it has. I mean, water's such a massive topic, and it was so challenging to even do it, because the Lourdes episode was the second half of that episode. So we're talking about the miraculousness of water. And I wanted to get into the structuring, the chemistry, and all of the incredible things, Gerald Pollack and the fourth phase of water and all of that stuff. But we actually, and these were the producer's ideas. So we had Martin, this guy, this water sommelier. So he brought out all these naturally found waters in these beautiful glass bottles, and we tried water from all of these different places. And one's had like 7,000 TDS, total dissolved solids,
Yeah,
and it
wow.
was all minerals. So
How did that taste?
like you're drinking Alka-Seltzer, or one was like someone just, dissolved a coin in here.
Wow.
I mean, and what we weren't able to really clarify is that's not necessarily what you want to be drinking. That's like almost on the side of like every once in a while, maybe this high magnesium water, you can just take a little shot glass, but it's not something. And the other thing is, so we talked a little bit about, obviously there's pH, there's total dissolved solids, there's dissolved oxygen, there's dissolved hydrogen, there's structure of water, there's memory of water, there's tons of stuff, which is why we went to Lourdes to kind of say, hey, there's a lot going on with water. And that's kind of our entryway into potentially, I'd love to do, like, literally, pun intended, a deeper dive on some of that stuff. I actually was just talking to a guy who's claimed he's found the most perfect water in Austria, and it chelates down through the mountains. It takes about 8 years, and there's no purification. There's no it's all coming directly from the pressure, so it's not touching anything.
Wow.
And so the water episode was, again, this water is not just water. It's got this H2O molecule, but then all of a sudden, okay, you have gas, you have water, you have vapor, which is gas, and then it freezes, but then you have this fourth phase. And so we didn't really get into all of that stuff. We just kind of left it to, hey, didn't you know that there's a lot going on with this water? So it started the conversation, but being so light in that information and starting to describe what pH is, starting to describe what total dissolved solids is, because the other side of total dissolved solids, and that just doesn't mean mineral content. In this day and age, total dissolved solids also means the fatal conveniences that the pharmaceuticals, the inorganic compounds, fluorides, heavy metals, chlorine, all of this, the volatile compounds that interact with the chlorine, that make up other, challenging amines for us to deal with. And it's just like, it's a massive thing. So we didn't really get to, but we then, in the episode, we went into a water treatment plant in France. And then France, before we went to Lourdes, France is doing a hell of a job getting good quality, pure water for everyone. So you can go to any of those fountains and they've gone through, UV, ozone, that you do use still, but very low amounts, because you still have to in order for chlorine to kill bacteria that's harmful in pipes, miles away.
Yeah, the chlorination of municipal water. It's like it's an important public health. Yeah. Even though it might not be good for the individual, right? Like the microbiome and everything, because it's an antibiotic essentially. Sure. It's probably important for just like the societal infrastructure. Yeah,
it's a really good point, because it's the only way we've been able to have clean water and not kill ourselves by turning on that tap. However, we do need to take now, because of pharmaceuticals, because of all these other constituents that get into the water, that we do need to, unless you have your own aquifer, unless you have your own stream that's been tested and not touched by anything in this modern world, which is almost impossible, you have to kind of deconstruct and filter all of that. And then reconstruct it again. And so that's adding some electrolytes back in. And then, of course, you can go down the rabbit hole of Schauberger's vortation. There's a bunch of spinning water so that it vortates and it structures and increases the surface area and tension and frequency, so that it vibrates, so it resonates more and creates that osmotic flow along with the electrolyte. So there's a lot. I mean, it's just like, we could sit here for a week and talk about all the intricacies. I've been to some of the most intense water conferences in Europe.
Wow.
With the top scientists on the planet that we don't know about. I'm sitting there. I literally stood up and go, do you realize that no one knows any of this research that all of you are spending your entire life on?
Yeah, it's
And they're
mind-blowing.
like, yeah, it's probably a good idea that we create some sort of way to share this. I'm like, but the way they're sharing, I can't follow it. Like, it's so intense. I'm like, the science behind, I mean, think of it, that they're starting to see science that a droplet of water has more memory space than a room that we're sitting in full of hard drives.
That's insane. I don't really know what that means, though. Like, so break that down for me.
So basically, they realized that water it's being influenced.
Wow.
And it's also delivering information. So they're realizing that it exchanges information all the time, whatever it's up against. And Lou Montier, a French, he actually was one that he's still alive, not well, but he's still alive. He discovered HIV. He was one of the people that discovered HIV. And what he did, one of his tests was, this is describing some of what water can do. So he put physical DNA in a glass of water. Okay, right next to it, he had purified water with nothing in it. Just the glass next to it, not touching, not the water was separated. Just through that association next to it, they could then measure the physical imprint of the DNA that had given itself over to the water sitting next to it.
Wow.
So they could reproduce DNA information that didn't have the physical DNA, but had the electrical frequency and imprint into that water. So then you extrapolate that back, and if water is being influenced by the electromagnetics of the earth, it's being influenced by the UV and the radiation from the planet and the electrical conduction of that. It's being it's allowing information and electricity to flow because of the chelation of the minerals and the vibration of that. So structured water is happening by this battery that's the earth. And so that is the normal way that we're supposed to receive that water and receive it into our cells and resonates with our cells. So they're just finding that information side of things, that this has it's kind of like if we took a hard drive and put it on this table, it doesn't really have a point of view what you put in it.
Right.
But it will take anything that you put in it. So water is like that. So that's why the work of Dr. Emoto back in the day was like, if you put love on your glass, it literally creates a structure, the geometry of love. And if you put hate, it distorts the geometry. There's no uniformity to that frequency. So it goes on and on and on with that. So then we're like, what am I drinking? Because you can filter water, you can do all the macro 3D stuff to it, but also there's this other influence to it. So anyway, it's
amazing.
Yeah, it's and when you're hearing this research from these doctors, you're just like, this is almost like they're testing something that it's quantum. So it's instantaneously receiving information. So it reacts in a quantum world. It acts chemically, biologically. So water is kind of the celestial body that, as we drink water.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah. So anyway, but we just we probably put, we just scratched the surface of what water is on the episode.
Okay, so I have a reverse osmosis water purifier in my kitchen. Should I write the word love on the tank?
100%.
100%.
Well, there's no downside.
Yeah, there is no downside.
If you look at it and you go, oh, cool, love. Not only is it affecting the water in your body, right? 70%.
Yeah.
Central nervous system, over 90%. well over that in your blood. So, hey, you're water. Why not? Placebo gives you 30% anyway. So
Yeah, you're right.
yeah. So why not? But the work of these guys clearly show that we're absolutely affecting. And then you go into, dude, we could go down a rabbit hole. Then you go into prayer. You go into, what are we telling ourselves? What are we saying to ourselves on a daily, on a subconscious, on a conscious? What are we doing? Are we in judgment? Are we in fear? That is literally quantum, physical, chemical, biologically affecting our water right now, instantaneously. So that just takes it to a whole nother mind blower of like, okay, if in fact this is true and water is influenced by anything, what am I saying, doing, being in myself? Because that will show up physically. And it's going to definitely show up with the water imprint and the flow and the nature of after sitting for 80 hours in research and listening to the guys, you just walk away going, if you think it's just H2O, then you haven't looked.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Where do you get your water from?
So I filter everything coming in. Well, currently I have my guest house that is currently my house on the property. So I filter everything coming in. So my showers, so I have big filter, and then I have a vortator. So it structures the water. So all the water coming in. So that's just coming in. Okay. And then I have an RO unit. So then it's going through getting out all the there's microplastics all over the place too. So that's a whole other, endocrine just annihilator of us men and women and all of that stuff. And then I also run through an on-demand hydrogen unit. So high amounts of antioxidants. Hydrogen is the number one antioxidant in the world, in the elements. So that's kind of it. And then I have all kinds of little structuring devices, right? So I have my blue bottle that has love engraved on it. I've got this, which is an incredible company, because you can just, whatever symbols you want on there, and blue is a frequency of a healthy cell. It's between, I could get me wrong, but it's between 25 and 30 microvolts, I believe, the frequency of blue, and that's a healthy cell. And so I love my blue bottle. I've got it in the car. And then there's another company called Flasca that uses the crystal in the glass. They embed it with frequency generating technology. So those are a couple crazy things. And then I have some other vortex things, and I've got some coming from some vortating machines coming from Austria that were just created. So yeah, just all of that. I definitely love to play with it after. It's a really important thing to, as we've discussed, deconstruct water so that you can reconstruct it correctly. And add your elements in. You need the physical side of things. You need the electrolytes. That's conduction. That's opening up the cell walls for for water to go in and out of the cell. You need that kind of stuff, and you need that frequency and that structuring side of it as well.
Yeah. Speaking of electrolytes, do you remineralize your water?
I do, 100%.
What do you like with what?
Himalayan salt's the easiest, it's
just like a pinch.
Just a pinch. You don't have to go crazy. You don't have to make a Soleil out of it and make it super intense, unless you want to do a colon cleanse. Like, you can easily take a liter of water and put 2 tablespoons. I probably shouldn't say this because people are just
people are gonna do it.
Yeah, I won't say anything, but just you can
colons spilling out all over the place.
Yeah, I do a colon cleanse every once in a while that way, reverse colon cleanse, like through this. There's something about that way of cleansing feels better to me than.
Well, we know that certain minerals like magnesium citrate, for example, draws water into the gut, and
right, exactly. So the cool thing about Himalayan salt is it's in the angstrom size electrolyte that you need. So if you're putting, magnesium citrate, it's a molecule that's too big for cells. So the cellular hydration is super important. You don't want to just go heavy on the salt. You don't want to put tablespoons in there and drink that all the time. You just a pinch. And now you have electrical conduction. Again, it's every cell has to resonate. And a healthy cell or a healing cell is 25 millivolts to 35 millivolts. And then when you get hurt, it jumps up to 50. And that because your body kicks in a higher amount of electrical conduction in order to heal. But if you don't have electrolytes, if you don't have a proper pH balanced system, if you don't have, from the food itself and proper mechanisms, then your body has a hard time, and then you're in pain. If it can't jump up to that kind of amount of millivolts, then you're in pain all the time. So anyway, that's a big discussion, but super important to remineralize the water. Don't be drinking all the time at all. Distilled water or reverse osmosis. You definitely want a pinch of salt or half a teaspoon per gallon.
Half a teaspoon per gallon.
Yeah, just think of it in terms of like, when you put water in your battery, it needs the elements in order for electrical conduction to happen. So we put distilled water in there because it's got the electrolytes to.
Wait, distilled water has nothing, right?
The distilled water has nothing, but
Yeah.
you in order for us to use it for our batteries in our cells, we need to have the electrical conduction, or it's going to reach out in the body and grab it from somewhere else, and then it's going to create an imbalance. So
yeah, I definitely remineralize my water. I use it's like drops of like different minerals, but I like the Himalayan, just putting salt in it.
Yeah.
It's cheap, easy.
Well,
Well, we don't have that much time left. This was so fun. I feel like it would be remiss to my female listeners if I didn't ask what it was like working with Zac. What he's like.
I mean, he's a sweetheart. He is. I mean, he cared from the beginning. He cares on the road. He was curious about learning, and he still is. And he's always up for a good adventure.
Yeah.
I mean, he loves getting out. He loves. I mean, so much so he'll go dark for a while, just like not even turn his cell phone on, and people are like, "Where's Zac?" And like he just needs to get out. It's intense, it's intense from that perspective. You really get a glimpse of, the worldwide fame of him and the intensity that he has to deal with, and thinking about, there's certain places where you think we're in the middle of nowhere, essentially, like, and people
know
flock. Like, so it's you can't help but to feel that part of the intense moments. And that's where I think he really likes to unplug. And so to be on an adventure, to be out in nature, like that's for sure, like he resonates with that big time. So yeah, I love the guy. I mean, he's just a big, sweet guy. And I didn't obviously know him or follow him before that. So I just know him as this kid. And so when you see that hit him, then you just kind of like, it's like weird. It's like shit. He has to deal with that.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, not saying that I'm on a scale like even remotely close to him, but it's a lot for me to deal with what I've got.
Yeah.
So like. Yeah. For somebody who has like international fame like that.
Yeah. Well, think about it. Like you go into certain pockets and it's more intense, right?
Oh,
certain
totally.
People that like, and then it's like boom, 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 and picture, and da 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 and da da. But he goes anywhere. Like we can shut that off. Like it just doesn't, But it's probably why he's like, I'm out. Like I just need to. So it's a. And listen, he got catapulted at 14, 15 years old. So you're trying to figure life out even at that time. And that's just a massive shift in any normalcy that you and I grew up. Because at least now it's like, okay, well, I've had a normal sort of upbringing. So I don't have to deal with that. And he's, half of his life has been this. So it's, you can't really understand it. You can't, it's hard to put your, you see it, but
yeah. What's next for you? Are you, this must have been a for somebody who's so used to just jet setting around looking for the next, latest and greatest superfood. Yeah. You've been grounded for the past couple of months, essentially, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think with this whole thing, creating my own podcast, creating my exercise and food app and on the side working on a ton of green energy tech stuff. Like I've been doubling down. I haven't publicly come out with it, but we're working directly with New Zealand and Australia and the Aborigines, and like we're hammering some stuff that's game-changing technology for power, water, food, and for doing that. And I've actually spent a lot of time in the converting plastic. Well, I wasn't converting, but looking at the technology for converting plastic to usable fuel and electricity and stuff. So, so I've been I'm just hunkering down more and more than ever and making these. And from the show, I'm aligning with a lot of incredible companies that are kicking some ass in a really good way. Another one is this amazing company called Footprint, where they're $1 billion company no one knows about, and they're supplying non-plastics for packaging to all the big boys, ConAgra, Pepsi, McDonald's, like no plastics, like alternative packaging, single-use packaging for these guys. So we need that. We have to shut off this faucet. We have to shut off this pollution faucet of single-use plastic. So I've aligned with them and just gonna, use whatever this is and just kick some ass, because we have to, man. Like we have to do something. So health of people, health of the planet. If it doesn't have that, I just don't care. Like I have to use everything I can to focus on those two big things.
I'm with you. When we see, because I feel like you're the person to ask, when we see disposable, cups or cutlery that says that, they're biodegradable, maybe they're like plant or vegetable based, are those like truly safe to use?
Some are. I mean, I think that's getting more and more. There's a demand. But the good news is I believe that most of these big companies want the solution. They're and some now are investing into it. But let's just be very clear. It is good to separate your plastics and put it in the blue bin or whatever color it is in your country or whatever, and separate that stuff. But let's also be clear. Recycling largely doesn't exist. 9%. And that's probably blown out of proportion. Like the rest is buried in Mother Earth. It's not being recycled. So we have to vote with our dollars. We have to be aware of companies doing this stuff, because we are putting it out to the curb. The recycling truck's coming, but it's not being recycled. So that is the dupe.
Where's that break in the chain?
Break in the chain is there's no demand. And the demand, it's infinitely cheaper to make new plastic than recycle the old plastic, because you have to refine it, you have to clean it, you have to get the glues out. There's all kinds of weird layering, because even a Starbucks cup that you look at, it's like, oh yeah, it's cardboard. No, it's not. There's layers of plastic inside that, so it's not recyclable. There's plastic in there, and so not to mention the top itself is completely plastic, and the straws and the everything else. So we have to have companies like Footprint that are actually at scale, at big scale, able to create those alternatives and turn off that, and work everything we can to actually start gobbling up and using this plastic. There's a bunch of, companies that are trying to do it, but we have to raise the attention, because it's not just, hey, cool, I'm recycling. No, you're not. You're separating. And it's good to do. Again, we need to do that, because once we're ready, we need to unbury the plastic and we need to actually get rid of it and do something with it and transmute it and change it and actually recycle it.
And the more people recycle, I mean, is there a point at which it could become cheaper to manufacture using recycled plastic as opposed to new plastic?
I hope so. I mean, it is probably 15-20% over.
Wow.
But they want to do it. And listen, they can work it in their business model.
That's the green tax, right? I mean, that's basically why you end up paying more
Exactly.
for conscientious products.
I'll run around as much as possible and pay more for the company. I'll pay more for board chores. I'll pay more for this because of the recycling, because of the transparency, because they're doing it right. The same thing we do with Barukas. Like, yeah, it's a premium nut. You know how freaking hard it is to crack that open and get it out here. But we're also going to plant trees. We're also going to, it's that transparency, that sustainability. It's like, God damn it. We have to do this because I go back to the damn episode when we're sitting up and just grabbing all that freaking plastic, and you expand that to billions of metric tons in the ocean. And there's a great company, 4Ocean, which they're trying to do a lot of stuff. They're gobbling up their big base in Bali because the ocean currents are bringing so much plastic to certain areas in Bali. So it's like they're trying to do, and they're creating, and there's businesses doing this. And so we just need to be aware of it, and we need to support these companies. We need to, sometimes I like that term, the green tax, just pay a little more. You'll appreciate it. You'll know, man in the mirror. Like, hey, cool. I spent my hard-earned money towards a company that actually cares, because these other companies, they don't as much. And I hope that we create more and more solutions for some of these big boys to continue to move. And having had good conversations this week, there are some really big companies that want to do it. So they have teams of people that are wanting to do these alternative things. So we just have to keep making entrepreneurials out there. Just keep, extrapolating and finding ways, because this is the future. We have to move in this direction. So, yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Dude, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Where can listeners, I got one last question for you, but where can listeners find you on social media? And also, I know you have a book, and we've got Barukas, which I think people should go check out. We have a promo code GENIUS where they'll get to save 15% off.
Be a genius.
Yeah, be a genius.
Why wouldn't you be a genius?
We did a whole episode on your nut, which you discovered and brought to market, and I've referred to it as like a peanut on steroids.
Yeah,
that's how I kind of describe them.
Pretty much accurate.
Yeah. So barukanut.com.
Barukas.com.
Barukas.com.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then darinolien.com. It links to everything there. Social media. Underscore. Damn, Instagram doesn't get back to me. So underscore darinolien.com on social. 121 Tribe for 3 free days of recipes and exercise if people want. Yeah, I'm sure there's a few others, but that's
got the new podcast, the Darin Olien Show.
Yeah. And Super Life, the book.
Super Life, the book.
It just became today. I found out, I don't know when this is coming out, but the Wall Street Journal bestseller.
Amazing.
USA Today bestseller and Amazon bestseller.
Isn't that amazing? That because your book came out a few years ago.
Yeah.
And it's you just never know.
Yeah, it just didn't have I didn't choose to buy PR teams and stuff. I just kind of, hey, I did it. I'm letting it out. And so it got a little love and kind of blew up. So
that's awesome. It's a good lesson to people to just do what gets you excited, to get out of bed every morning like you. And, like eventually, there's going to be a comet and it's going to take all your stuff to the next level.
If not, just keep going.
Just keep going.
Keep doing it. Keep plugging. I mean, that's what we need to do, and we need to just focus on beyond just this current situation and everything else, and just take care of yourself, be healthy, be happy, and then think of ways to contribute, because the planet needs it.
Last question that gets asked to everybody on the show: what does it mean to you, Darin Olien, to live a genius life?
Great question. I think it's integration. It's kind of the discovery of self, learning more about yourself, learning more about myself informs my relationships, it informs my passions, it informs my North Star, if you want to call it, that compass inside. And when I live my genius, I listen to the compass inside myself, and I forge every opportunity to say yes to it, because the more I say yes to my knowing, the more it grows, and the more I trust it, and the more it just expands, and the gifts of the universe continue, even though they may not look like gifts. I think everything happens for you, not to you.
Beautiful. I love that. Well, thank you again for being here. This was awesome, and congrats on the show.
Thanks, man.
It's great. To all you guys out there in podcast land, thank you for tuning in. Appreciate you. Text me. Let me know what you thought about this episode of the show, 310-299-9401, and I will catch you on the next episode. Peace.